Hello and welcome to our podcast. The title of this podcast is Adolescence and Memory. Here we are going to focus on adolescence, physical brain development, working memory, the impact of internet on memory, and we'll conclude with some strategies for teachers.
Human memory is a complex process. It is evident in our every thought and action. Memory is an important part of what makes us human. Memory can be understood as the complex process where we store, retain and subsequently recall information and past experiences that affect and influence our current behaviour. The development of memory is impacted during adolescence. This period of momentous change where we transition from childhood to adulthood. The immense physical changes that occur during adolescence can be viewed in two ways. Firstly, and more traditionally, it can be viewed as a period of neural gawkiness, where the adolescent brain is viewed as a work in progress and incomplete. The other view, which may be more helpful to us as teachers, is the adolescent brain as highly adaptive, sensitive, and perfectly equipped to make the transition from childhood to adulthood. While memory can be understood as a brain-wide activity, there are parts of the brain that are specifically related to memory.
Temporal lobe of the brain, there is the hippocampus and amygdala, which deals with memory and emotion regulation. The hippocampus is where the formation of long-term memories take place. Damage to this part of the brain could cause amnesia, which means that you would be unable to form new memories. The amygdala is made up of neurons that process emotions. It is responsible for the response and memory of emotions. An example of that would be that the amygdala can detect when the human feels fear and is scared. Any damage that happens to the amygdala could cause developmental problems. Conditions such as anxiety, depression, and phobias are suspected of being linked to abnormal functions of the amygdala. This diagram shows the maturing of the brain from 5 to 20 years old. In this diagram, the blue represents the maturing of brain areas and the yellow represents the grey matter. The grey matter in the brain are dendrites and the cell body of the neuron in the brain. The grey matter processes information, but the grey matter decreases during adolescence. As shown in the diagram, the amygdala matures quite early in the brain. This, as mentioned earlier, is responsible for memory that is emotionally triggered. Many theories have been developed to understand the complex process of memory. In this podcast, we are going to discuss the information processing theory. The information processing theory of memory explains the way our memory works by comparing it to the way a computer functions. Like the hard drive of a computer, the brain takes in information, stores the information, and recalls it when required. This system can be divided into three different kinds of processes: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding processes include putting information into memory storage. Storage processes sustain and hold encoded material. Retrieval processes get information out of the memory stored through recognition and recall. It is important to note that these processes do not operate separately from one another. How well information is stored and retrieved depends largely on the way it is encoded.
Memory is also comprised of many subsystems that work together. These include sensory memory, working memory, and long-term memory. Information is gathered from our environment through our senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste, and stored in an uncoded form in sensory memory. The information gathered in our sensory memory is available for further processing in working memory. This subsystem acts as a temporary store for sensory information. Long-term memory holds and stores information that is well learned from working memory over a long period of time. The capacity of long-term memory is said to be unlimited. Through interference, information can be lost rather than stored. This loss of information can be avoided through rehearsal. We will discuss this more in depth later in the podcast.
Working memory has been referred to as the workbench of the memory system. In working memory, new information is held temporarily and combined with knowledge from long-term memory to solve problems or understand new information. Working memory is said to contain what you were thinking about in that moment. Therefore, it is considered an important process for reasoning and the guidance of decision-making and behaviour. Working memory includes both temporary storage and active processing, where active mental effort is applied to both new and old information. It is comprised of 3 different elements: the central executive, the phonological loop, and the visuospatial sketchpad. The central executive is part of working memory that drives the whole system of working memory. It does so by allocating information and tasks to the phonological loop and visuospatial sketchpad. The central executive controls attention, makes plans, and retrieves and integrates information from long-term memory. 2 systems help and support the central executive: the phonological loop and the visuospatial sketchpad. The phonological loop is a system for rehearsing words and sounds for working memory. As it holds verbal and sound information, we can now hold as much information in the phonological loop as we can rehearse between 1.5 and 2 seconds. Visually presented language, such as written text in a book, can be transformed into phonological code. The visuospatial sketchpad is the part of working memory that holds visual and spatial information. This part of working memory is mainly used for navigation. It manipulates visual and spatial information in our long-term memory. For example, if you close your eyes, could you imagine the layout of the room you are in right now?
It is clear that the duration of information in working memory is short, only about 5 to 20 seconds, unless you keep rehearsing the information. Because the information in working memory is fragile and easily lost, it must be kept activated to be retained. Activation is high as long as you are focusing on information, but it fades quickly when attention shifts away. When activation fades, forgetting follows. To keep information activated in working memory for longer than 20 seconds, most people keep rehearsing mentally. Information that we teach in the classroom may be lost from the working memory of teenagers through interference. The term interference refers to the new way in which processing information interferes or gets confused with the old information. Because interferences in working memory can take many forms, we've decided to focus on the internet as an interference. A study conducted by Ofcom found that on average teenagers spend around 27 hours and 36 minutes online every week. Another study conducted discovered over 92% of teenagers would use the internet daily, with over 50% of those saying that they are constantly on the internet. In his 2010 book, The Shallows, Nicholas Carr states, "The more pieces of information we can access and the faster we can distill their gist, the more productive we can become as thinkers." Carr's research has shown that as our use of the internet makes it harder for us to lock information into our biological memory, we're forced to rely more and more on the net's capacious and easily searchable artificial memory. The Shallows mentions that it's no longer terribly efficient to use our brains to store information. Technology writer Dan Tapscott converses to his readers that search engines such as Google are diminishing the art of making memory and learning. He proclaims now that we can look up anything with a click on Google, memorizing long passages or historical facts is obsolete. Memorization is a waste of time. Clive Thompson suggests by offloading data onto the silicon, we free our own grey matter for more human tasks like brainstorming and daydreaming. Carr investigates this statement and discusses the benefits that this has for creativity. Being artist teachers, we are able to appreciate this value.
It is important to remember that forgetting is a valuable and important part of memory. Without forgetting, our working memories would become overloaded and learning would cease. However, as teachers, we need to focus on strategies to help students remember. Some of these include ensuring the learner's attention is engaged, focusing on important information, delivering information in a clear and organised way, making connections between what is already known and what is being learned. We can do this by focusing on meaning rather than memorization. Thank you for listening to our podcast. This podcast was created by Brid, Rebekah, Ciaran and Caitriona.